Man, it only feels like 6 months ago I was talking about Secrets of the Storm and expressing my concern over a new DLC being announced so quickly. Wait a minute. Hi, my name is 61% Human, and today you're going to witness my descent into insanity. And also talk about Alloyed Collective. Yeah, allow me to eat past me's words for a second. Is Alloyed Collective good? Yes, it's a stellar expansion that is definitely worth the price. Ignore the fact that I probably just spoiled the title and thumbnail. I actually haven't made them yet. But enough stalling, you probably want to know why Alloyed Collective is good, and that's exactly what I'm here to do. Operator is the default survivor, and this might be my new favorite character. If you told me that a survivor whose kit is 95% drones would end up being my favorite, I'd probably call you insane. And a liar. I believe he only has one skill that doesn't relate to drones, and that's his primary, which is a little weird. It has a charge system, but unlike other primaries that use charges, you can actually spam this one. The charges just improve the damage. I like this idea because it solves one of the issues I have with charged primaries, that being that once you run out of charges, you just can't do anything. Granted, most of them have fast enough charges, it's not too much of a problem, especially since most of their recharge speed scales with attack speed, but it can still be a small problem early game. Operator's primary also ricochets the bullet on kill, and this is such a satisfying feature. It's so addicting to charge the primary and just watch a bunch of trash mobs die in one shot. For the secondary, the only one I've really used is the default, where you command your drones to use a specific ability. Most of them just make your drone do their specific action, but it's still very neat being able to have some control over them, even if I just end up spamming this button at whatever enemy has the most health. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Operator also spawns with two special drones that are just retextured versions of the gunner, healing, and transport drones, but their admin override skills are slightly different. Crosshair has a 50% increase to the ricochet bullet's damage, Dock grants shield instead of health, and Chirp can pick up and move chests, which I didn't even know I could do until writing this in the script. These drones will automatically revive when destroyed, meaning you will always have at least two drones available, which is kinda necessary when every skill on this character needs a drone to work. The alternate secondary allows you to command your drones to ram into whatever enemy you select, and this is an okay ability. I personally don't use it much because I find it more fun to spam my drones at whatever scares me, and I'm scared of a lot of things. Ascent Protocol is your base utility, and I don't quite understand it that well even now. You get lifted into the air by your drone, and you can leap off of it to be caught by another one, but sometimes it just doesn't work. It's a little unclear when you're supposed to be able to leap to another drone, and I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong or if it's not working properly. The alternate lets you summon a shield with your drone and fire it at an enemy while being pushed back. This isn't nearly as cool as the default, so I personally don't find myself using it, but it's still neat, definitely easier to understand. Ejection Core fires your currently equipped drone forward and suspends all enemies caught in the blast. This also inflicts the Nanobugs debuff, which increases their damage taken from skills by 100% that are split into hits that do 120% damage. Why it's split up this way, I have no clue, but it's a really fun ability. I love just suspending a bunch of enemies and having my ricochet shot bounce between all of them. Oh, it's so nice. You also get a little hop when you activate the ability and can even use this as a mobility tool, which makes it really fun to mess with. Finally, your alternate special is a similar concept, but instead of being an AoE skill, your drone will absorb damage and detonate, even allowing your own shots to build up the damage. It's a neat idea for sure, and I could see myself using it in the future, but for now my preference lies with the default special. Actually, that's how I feel about Operator as a whole. I much prefer their default kit over taking any alternate abilities, and for the drones, I tend to take the Gunner and Transport drone. Also, much like the Secrets of the Storm survivors, Operator and Drifter only get one alternate skin to unlock, and it's just a standard beat the game on Monsoon unlock, while the base game characters all got new skins for interacting with the DLC final boss. While I understand why they didn't want to do cross DLC skins, example being Survivors of the Void survivors getting Allied Collective skins, why didn't the DLC characters get skins for interacting with their own DLC? This was something I never understood about the previous DLC either, why those characters didn't get Prime Meridian skins. Again, I get if they don't want every character to get new skins with every DLC, because I'm assuming we're getting semi-regular DLC, but can't the new characters get skins related to their content? It's a really weird decision, and I hope they maybe add the missing skins in a future update, but I don't have high hopes for that. Drifter is the returning survivor and was kind of the last survivor I was hoping they'd add from the first game, as I wasn't a super big fan of her there, and also her coming back almost certainly meant temporary items would come back alongside her. While I'm saving temporary items for later, safe to say my first impressions of Drifter weren't very positive. Thankfully, I reserved judgment, and it's safe to say my opinions on Drifter have changed substantially. My only real issue is the fact that she's a melee character, which I historically don't like in this game. She does have a lot of unique mechanics with her, starting with her passive, which lets scrap give you bonuses depending on the rarity of the scrap. White scrap gives 6% movement speed, green scrap gives 3 health regen, red scrap gives 30% attack speed, and yellow scrap lowers skill cooldowns by 15%. These are really neat bonuses that I find super fun to synergize around, especially with one of her skills I'll talk about later. This, and something else we'll talk about later, has really changed the way I interact with this game to a small degree, introducing even more micromanaging that I really love. The best part is that this level of min-maxing is completely optional, meaning you can just choose not to interact with it. Her primary makes her swing her sack around to generate junk on hit. It's a 3-hit combo, with the 3rd hit dealing more damage and stunning enemies, as well as having a 40% chance to generate junk. Unfortunately, you can't sprint cancel this like you can with Acrid's primary, but otherwise this ability is really good, although the animation feels just a bit weird. However, it's also really funny when used at high speeds. Cleanup is her default secondary and her only real ranged attack, where you throw debris at enemies. This attack also features a nice gambling mode, where it has 14 different items that can spawn, each with their own rarity and special effects. I'm just going to flash these all on screen, because if I went over everything, this video would take even longer than it's already taking. But some of the stuff here is pretty neat. You can also spam this ability if you have junk, which has led me to affectionately call this move Random Bullshit Go, as everything on screen hopefully gets obliterated. Her alternate secondary is the ever-beloved Junk Cube, and I actually don't care for this ability. It's certainly neat and has some cool tech, however I can't just spam click and obliterate whatever is on screen, so it's just okay. You can stand on the cube and hit it, which is a really cool interaction that allows her to deal with flying enemies a bit better. This also used to have an exploit where you could gain junk from the cube, allowing for infinite temporary items. This has sadly been patched out, which is unfortunate because it was pretty funny, but I also get why they did this. Repossess might be the single greatest ability ever added to this game, as it allows me to deal with my demons the only way I know how to, tossing them off the map and let the world kill them. Why confront them when I can just toss them away? Works every time. This ability can pick up nearly anything in the game, from enemies to allies to chests and printers. The only thing I can think of that it can't grab are mission critical objects, like teleporters, halcyon shrines, and the like. Grabbing a thing also lets you use them as an attack, with each item and monster having a weight system that affects the damage they deal and how much you're slowed. Monsters only take 3 hits before they break out, but they can also break out on their own. Avoid grabbing fire elites, as they can still damage you through the bag. The alternative to this is Tornado Slam. I don't have much to say about this ability, because it's honestly kind of lame, but my friend wants me to tell you that this attack has a value internally called Bounce Tua. Sorry. This attack has a value internally called Bounce Tua that effectively does nothing. But it's there. I just thought you should know. Oh my god, who wrote this shit, dude? Hi, it's me from the future here. I'm really tired and I really want to get this video out. However, I have to make a small addendum. It is with a heavy heart that I must announce they have removed Bounce Tua from the game. I'm just gonna give you a second to grieve. Okay, your second's over. I've got to get back to editing. I'm very stressed and I'm very tired. This video is supposed to come out in 2 days. Please somebody send help. Okay, back to the video. Salvage is her default special and allows you to consume 8 junk to spawn 4 temporary items. There's a small quirk with temporary items where they don't actually start their expiration timer until you pick them up, meaning with enough patience you can just stack a bunch of temporary items near the teleporter and pick them all up at once for one big boost of power. My opinion on this ability matches my opinion on temporary items as a whole, and that I don't really like it. Plus her alternate special is infinitely better because it allows for a lot better synergy with her kit. Tinker is one of the most broken skills in the game, but not because it does a lot of damage, or wipes the screen, or files your taxes. No. You don't use the skill for its combat utility, not that there's really much there anyway. You use it to gamble. This ability allows you to reroll multi-shops, printers and cauldrons, void potentials, and Aurelionite fragments. The rarity of the items in the latter two stay the same, and this only works twice. You can also use this ability on an item on the ground to scrap it and gain a temporary copy of it, basically allowing you to become a portable scrapper. This ability also has a fair amount of width to it, meaning if you position things correctly, you can use this on multiple items at once. This ties back into a passive of scrap, granting you benefits based on the rarity, and because you don't have to rely on the RNG of a scrapper spawning, you can always use her passive and have scrap ready for any 3D printer you may run across. Although there's now some consideration to scrapping items, which I'll have to talk about later because this section is already long enough and there's so much more to go over. This DLC adds in 20 normal items, and for the most part, they're all perfectly fine. There's 2 new item tiers, temporary and meal. Temporary items are, well, temporary versions of items. They last about 80 seconds and then expire. They can be obtained through various means: shops, junk drones, drifter specials, and substandard duplicator. These were originally introduced in Risk of Rain Returns, and my opinion on them in that game reflects my opinion of them in this game. I don't like them. I'm not big into the power fantasy of these items, and I'm sure they're good in the right hands. Unfortunately, my hands aren't the right ones, so I'm gonna pass them off as whatever. Meal items are an interesting item tier because they're not normally obtainable from a chest, but instead from a new mechanic introduced in this DLC, the Wandering Chef. Can't believe it took them a year and a new DLC to make Chef good at this game. This chef acts as a crafting system, allowing you to combine 2 items to make one. You can access Chef after defeating the Soulless Wing and brings a whole new level of item management because you could scrap that useless wax quail, or you could save it to use it at the chef to get a better item. The meal items are a unique tier to the system, with them being a bit more difficult to get, but very worth it. Hearty Stew increases health regen, and at full health, your regen is added to your damage. This item always requires a Lepton Daisy to craft it, and it is well worth it, as Lepton Daisy isn't that great of an item. Quick Fix requires a white scrap to craft and increases bonus health and regen gains by 50%. This item is pretty alright, but really shines through on Full Sun, as he loves gaining health. Sauteed worms are crafted by using both of the perforators and gives a 10% chance on hit to summon a worm that does 500% damage with the lifespan of 10 seconds. The cost for this item is very high, as the perforators are already really good and rare, but I think the trade-off is well worth it. The spectacle alone makes it worth the cost, but it's also just a good item. Seared Steak is just the cooler bison steak. It gives 50 max health plus an additional 5% of your max health. There's basically no reason not to make this item, considering it requires a bison steak and more max health never hurt anybody. It's definitely the weakest of the items unless you play Big and Greedy Sun over there, but it's still worth it if you have nothing better to craft. Ultimate Meal is another high cost item that gives plus 2 luck when you're at full health. This is also generally worth crafting, especially since it doubles your clover as long as you stay at full health. I don't know if you knew this, but shields don't count as health, so if you stack those, you'll just be chillin'. Overall, these items are a very welcome addition to the game, as well as the system in general, and I'd love to see more of these in the future. A lot of potential lies here, and I hope they don't get neglected like the Void items have been. We're already out of the order I wanted to go over the items in, so why not continue that trend and cover the legendaries first? There's only 3 this time, and the first one is the biggest industry plant I've ever seen in my life. Orphaned Core spawns the so-called best buddy, and it is a companion of all time. It launches itself at enemies for 400% damage, but has Loader's quirk of doing more damage the faster it moves. It also inherits your movement speed items, making this easier to take advantage of. However, since it's a Soulless Invalidator, it's a little, how do I say this nicely? Stupid. You can pet it to get a free blast shower, but it's whatever, I guess. Substandard Duplicator works exactly the same as it does in Risk of Rain Returns. Picking up an item grants you a temporary copy of it, as well as making all temporary items last 10 seconds longer. It's a fine item, huge if you're into temporary items, but I've spoken my piece on them already, no point in going over it again. What's neat is that this is the first item from Returns to return. I wonder if we'll see more Returns items return, as there's some neat items there that I think would do well in this game. To round off the legendaries, we have Networked Suffering, and this might be one of the best items added this entire DLC. So good, it's the only item to get nerfed post-release. It allows you to tag 4 enemies and spreads a portion of the damage to each affected enemy. What?
Yeah, that's why I need you here.
This is busted, but like with a capital B. It got hit with a 5% nerf, but even then this thing still feels insanely strong, especially if you play a burst heavy survivor. It's useful no matter who you play, but put on a burst survivor and watch the world crumble before you. Continuing this really jank order, let's talk about the yellow items, as well as the one equipment in Lunar. Deus Ex Machina allows you to parry and might actually be the most busted item added in this DLC. Successfully parrying damage nullifies said damage, reduces equipment cooldown by 75%, and makes your next attack guarantee your on-hit effects to activate. A little quirk with this is when it tells you you can parry any and all damage, it means it. Fall damage, Void Fog, Rex's self-damage, any damage. And you know that blessing buff that makes your next attack trigger your on-hit effects? Well, if your blessed attack kills an enemy, it also activates any on-kill effects. Also, having 2 fuel cells is enough for your entire cooldown to be refreshed. You could also stack enough gestures to have permanent parry window uptime, but that takes a while, and by that point, you're probably killing the entire map just by existing anyway. But hey, at least you get to glow green. Neutronium weight is the new Lunar, and I just don't understand why it exists. While in combat, your stats are reduced, but you can send the weight to an enemy when you hit them, and whoever holds the weight has their stats reduced. On death, whoever killed the weight holder now gains the weight. Why? It's just too much work for little benefit, especially because this thing has travel time, meaning it could just be outran or not even get to the enemy before it dies. I just don't understand this item's purpose. Let's just move on before my head explodes into the yellow items. Functional Coupler is an item that gives you an extra equipment slot. This is a really versatile item as it allows you to macro out of your mind or have 2 separate builds going on at the same time. The way you swap is a little weird, but it makes sense. Although I don't really like to stack more of these than just one because cycling through equipment isn't something I particularly want to do in the midst of combat. Faulty Conductor is an item that releases electricity to energize your nearby allies, granting buffs and making all electrical damage deal critical hits. It's an alright item. I don't really have much more to say than that since this item is quite rare. You're probably only going to see one of these per run, if even that, as it drops from the Alloy Hunter, a boss that you can only fight once per run as far as I'm aware. It still be printed, but I can count on one hand the amount of boss item printers I've seen in my entire time playing this game. The next 4 items are interesting because they aren't your traditional yellow items, instead acting more as key items for the Alloyed Collective content. The Sentry Key is dropped from Collective Elites on Conduit Cannon and gives 15% movement speed, although this effect doesn't stack for some reason. The primary use for these are to use on Sentry Terminals to progress in the stage. Prison Matrix gives 50% armor and also does not stack. Although this sounds good on paper, it doesn't do anything for most of the cast since it scales off of base armor for some reason. Primary use for this item is to unlock Drifter. Finally, the last 2 yellows are pointless outside of the Alloyed Collective content, granting no benefit to the player. The Encrypted Cerebellum drops after defeating the Solus Wing, and its only purpose is to be combined with a Sentry Key or Prison Matrix at the Wandering Chef to transform it into the Exposed Cerebellum. This item allows you to access the true final boss of the DLC, but more on that later. There's only 2 common items this time around, and they're alright. Eclipse Light grants you Barrier when your skill comes off cooldown, but the values are far too low. It's 1% for the first stack, and then a whopping 0.25% per stack. Really? This is something I feel Gearbox has dropped the ball on with this DLC. Some of these items just don't feel like they were designed to stack well. I really don't think this item would be broken if it gave 1% extra per stack. I get they want to combat power creep, but this feels like the opposite direction we should be heading in. Also, recharging abilities in chunks with something like Laser Burst doesn't work either, except it does work because Hungering Gaze gives a large chunk of barrier when it reloads? I don't know anymore, my head is kind of exploded thinking about it. The other common item is Hiker's Boots, and these are a really good addition, increasing your critical hit chance and damage when you hit an enemy that is below you. Thankfully, there's no weird interactions with this one, it works as you would expect. Thank God. Box of Dynamite grants you Lieutenant Drone Boy, and also allows your drone to drop sticks of dynamite onto enemies every 10 seconds. It's basically the little brother of spare drone parts, and it's awesome. Coupled with the better drone AI, this is a very neat item. Faraday Spur is a movement item that builds up charge as you move, granting 160% movement speed and 200% jump height at 100% charge. When you get 25% charge, you can jump and explode for 400% damage. I'm not a super big fan of the jump being the thing that triggers the explosion, because otherwise, this is a really good item. Although, for some reason, this item only builds up charge while grounded, again with these weird caveats that aren't mentioned anywhere. What is going on? Kinetic Dampener is another shield item that grants 30 armor while you have a shield. Upon your shield breaking, it explodes for 100% damage plus an extra amount of damage that I just can't comprehend right now. You also gain 4% of your health as shield. This is a very powerful item, especially in combination with something like Ultimate Meal. Finally, Collector's Compulsion gives 3% to all stats when you pick up an item or collectible. This item is really good as most things in the game activate it, meaning its uptime will be pretty high. Combine it with an item like Growth Nectar, since it counts as a buff for it, and you'll just have infinite stats all the time. That's not all this DLC adds, however, as of course we have new stages, and half of them are implemented into the normal stage rotation, and half are unique to something I will hereby dub Path of the Collective. Path of the Collective is always available to start on any stage 3 by interacting with this little doodad right here and going in this portal after the teleporter. Afterwards, you'll end up on Conduit Canyon, a stage that on the surface looks standard but is fairly unique for a standard level. It's completely linear. Unlike every other non-boss level in the game, you and the teleporter have fixed spawns, and in order to progress you need to insert the sentry keys into these terminals. A cool feature of the stage is that you can actually skip the first 3 terminals by simply jumping over the wall here, which is really cool, and I'm glad they didn't just block this area off. Most other game developers probably would have, so props to them for not doing that. There's also a complete fake out boss here, which is an interesting concept. Actually, the teleport event before you enter this stage also has an additional boss fight, which is a really neat concept. I'm glad this team is exploring ideas like this, because sure, these may be small additions, but it does go a long way to adding some variety into the game and how certain content is accessed. Also, a good way to add some difficulty without inflating numbers. Back to Conduit Canyon, after the fake boss gets to what I believe is 75% health, it will die and the real boss, Alloy Hunter, will show up. This boss is mostly exclusive to the stage, as alluded to earlier, but can show up on stages that get the Vulture Family event. This boss is honestly pretty fun, although the fight can get a bit chaotic with how visually busy the attacks can be. This isn't related to the expansion or anything, but I didn't know that boss items have a 15% chance to drop from teleport events. Too bad it feels a lot more rare than that, but that might be because I play single player. Anyway, back on track. The teleporter has a different design, and I just think stuff like this is really cool. It makes this place feel like its own area. Going through the teleporter brings you to Solutional Haunt, which is a very atmospheric stage. Going down the giant hole in the center leads you down to the boss arena after you see this cutscene. You can't skip this cutscene, but you can skip the little airlock sequence that plays right after. I just don't know how to do it consistently. This fight is a little long, but not because of the mechanics or anything. The solo swing is just really tanky for some reason. You're not supposed to directly damage the boss either, instead shooting these 4 weak points. A bit of advice for this boss, try to keep all the weak points at roughly the same amount of health. Because of how tanky the main body is, doing direct damage is ineffective, meaning the primary way to deal damage to the boss is by destroying these weak points. Unlike other bosses in this game, this boss's phases are tied to its health. So if you can keep all the weak points at roughly the same health, you should be able to speed past the later phases of the fight. The attacks on this boss are whatever. It's definitely an interesting fight, but I feel it drags on because of the health scaling. I feel like if they just made it slightly less tanky, it'd be fine, but it's still leagues better than Voidling. The telegraphs are also pretty well made, but like Alloy Hunter, the fight can get a little hectic. Not as much because you have a bigger arena and no ads to deal with, but half the time I feel like I have no clue what I'm supposed to be staring at. Maybe I'm just washed. Defeating the boss isn't the end, however, because there's a little bit extra to the stage. Around the map there will be points where there's extra loot to get. One of the caves has a TC280, which was recently buffed. Another cave has an area where you get both prison matrices, which you can use to get some loot and even the new survivor. Both of these areas will spawn enemies, but they shouldn't be too hard to deal with, although when you try to leave this cave, you will be locked in a fight with an Umber version of Wolty, who holds shaped glass and will drop it upon death. In the main room, you can find a vault that costs 1 prison matrix to open, and in here you'll be treated to a broken handy that drops 3 items, Drifter's backpack, which gives 3 temporary items, and a small, large, and cloaked chest. Drifter is also here, and will require you to spend the other prison matrix. Don't forget to pick up the encrypted cerebellum on your way out. Going through the Soulless Wings eye thing, you'll arrive in what is probably my new favorite environment in the game, Computational Exchange. Visually, this area is just breathtaking, and I love to run around in here just taking it all in. Above your spawn point is a platform, which gives free loot, which I didn't know existed until now. In front of the spawn is Specs, which is basically this area's newt. It can't be killed oddly enough, and if its health falls below 90%, it will steal an item and kick you out. Very weird it's unable to be killed, but oh well. Right below it is the Charity Shrine, in which you can put an item in and drop it if it isn't the exposed cerebellum. And you can only offer 3 items to it per visit before it will only accept the cerebellum, which makes a lot of sense when you remember the recycler and substandard duplicator exists. You can also activate Prayer Bead's effects here without losing the item, which is really powerful. To the right of Specs, there's a drone scrapper, a 3D printer, and a drone combiner station, which is really nice of it to give us. To the left is where the Wandering Chef resides, but he already had his moment to shine, so we're just gonna ignore him. After giving the exposed cerebellum to Specs, it will open a decrypted portal, taking you to the true final boss of the DLC. You'll be spit out in the Neural Sanctum, and this is another visually stunning environment. I wish we got more areas that look like this in the previous one, because this visual style is really pleasing to look at. Proceeding forward, you'll encounter the Soulless Heart. This fight is really interesting because most of the attacks will destroy parts of the arena temporarily, making positioning matter even more than it already does. Although it can be hard to understand at first, once I got the hang of this fight, it became really fun. The real unique part comes after you kill the last phase, because the boss doesn't just die, it gives you an offer. Become part of the collective, or kill it. This choice actually does matter somewhat, as accepting the offer ends the run while rejecting it will drop 1 item from a very small pool and let you continue the run, but that's not the only difference. Depending on your character, accepting or rejecting the offer will unlock you a skin, and these skins have very different design ideas between them. Accepting the offer gives skins that are similar in appearance to the Soulless Heart, while the rejection skins match the general Soulless and Vulture vibe, and while I personally like the rejection skins more, I think the accept ones look pretty nice too. This DLC introduced 6 enemies, and they're all pretty neat. The Soulless Invalidator is an enemy whose primary gimmick is disabling your items with a very well telegraphed attack. I thought this attack would be a lot worse to deal with, but after playing against it, it's really not that bad. If anything, I rarely notice my items getting disabled from this enemy, instead most of them coming from collective elites. The Soulless Prospector lunges forward with its drill to hit you, and this is well telegraphed too, something I wish all the enemies in this game had. Soulless Extractor is probably the second most annoying enemy in this DLC, because when they hit you, they take an entire stack of an item and become super passive, avoiding you as best it can. Luckily, it isn't too difficult to kill, but it's still rather annoying. The Soulless Transporter is an interesting enemy because it just seems to have the AoE from Soulless Control Unit, but without the launching aspect. I'm just so confused by this move. Soulless Scorchers have one primary goal: oil you up and light you on fire. There's a small issue. These guys kind of suck at oiling you up. It's kind of hard for them to light me up if they can't even cover me up in oil first. And now we arrive at the most annoying enemy in this DLC. Soulless Distributor. This little thing spawns tiny balls that have ruined my life and my marriage. I lost my job and the house is soon to go too. Please help, I've lost everything. Oh, also the little mines it spawns will become elites if the distributor is also elite. As if this enemy couldn't ruin things even further. This DLC also brought a very beloved artifact from Returns. Artifact of Prestige. This artifact guarantees a Mountain Shrine to spawn on every stage and makes them permanently stackable. This also turns the Mountain Shrine icon pink, which wasn't actually in the game until a recent update, meaning the game's finally playable again. Gearbox also went ahead and reworked the drone AI, and while this would have been a welcome change by itself, they also went ahead and added 7 new drones. This is a pretty massive change, as drones were always a weird part of the game before. They existed, and I'd typically buy them whenever I had spare money, but I'd never actively seek them out, nor would I get excited seeing a drone. Now whenever I see a drone, especially on an operator, I feel a small amount of joy. Just a small amount because Adachi Ray still isn't married to me, but it's still a small amount. There's also a drone combiner that upgrades your drones, and it's a really neat thing. It can be hard to use since you need multiple of a drone to use it, but it's worth the reward if you can use it. Transport Drone is a drone that picks up your enemies and drops them for increased fall damage. I love this drone. It's so funny to just watch my enemies get carried away and then slammed into the planet. The upgrade to this drone increases the drone's movement speed by 60%. Junk Drone drops temporary items every 2 minutes, and it's okay. Upgrading it makes it drop more temporary items more frequently. Cleanup drone slows nearby enemies, and any enemy affected by this drone that is killed is turned either into money nuggets or health pickups. Upgrading this drone increases the suction radius and provides an extra pickup. Jailer drone roots nearby targets. Upgrading this drone increases skill and debuff duration by 5 seconds. Barrier drone gives a nearby ally a barrier. Leveling up this drone makes the beam last longer and gives more barrier. Bombardment drone sends down 16 lightning strikes in one area and is very good for AoE. Leveling up this drone adds an additional 8 shocks. Finally, Freeze drone is basically just Huntress's glaive, but it freezes instead. Upgrading this drone increases proc efficient by 0.5 and max bounces by 6. These drones are a very welcome addition, and I hope future DLC adds more drones. Overall, Allied Collective is a very solid expansion. I initially had my worries about this DLC's quality, but I am very happy to say that this DLC is leagues better than Seekers of the Storm. Better than Survivors of the Void, though? I'm not quite sure. It's a hard call for me to make personally. This DLC is worth the $15 price tag for sure, but compared to Survivors of the Void, I still feel like something's missing. I'm also curious if we're gonna keep getting DLC every year for this game. I thought I'll cover the next DLC, but not out of lack of interest. I'm sure it'll be good, but if it doesn't do much different, then I personally don't see a point dedicating one of my few videos a year to this game every year. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for watching, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.